Good morning, everybody. It's 8 a.m. New York time. Welcome to the breakfast session. It's NFP day. Let's do the disclaimers first of all. So let's get those out of the way. All Bookmap Ltd materials, information and presentation are for educational purposes only and should not be considered specific investment advice nor recommendations. Trading futures, equities and digital currencies involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. And a quick reminder of the revamp of the Learning Center, so feel free to check it out. Let's switch over to live Bookmap. As I was just saying in the Discord channel before we went live, I was looking to see if they were going to get any momentum in NQ, which is the left half of the screen, A-Trader HE, and just to see if they could take out this overnight low around the 970. It was a little bit choppy on after they got back to the 16,000 level, but now looks like they have got some momentum. So I'm just watching to see what kind of volume they have. If they can get below 980, it could get interesting and they could take that out. So 980 is where I'd call the line in the sand. This could just be, and it probably is, just getting fuel for whatever happens at the NFP. And I'll just leave it on this screen for a second, just to see if we can see this action. We can zoom in a little bit. This is the Trader Map Pro filtered. And if we get a chance before 8:30, we can have a look at how useful that has been today. I hope people have had a chance to actually get onto that beta and test it out, certainly for NQ. ES today has also got an issue. If we look across at the unfiltered in ES, we've begun to get the same algo bands that we have been getting in the NQ for the December contract. And I'm still trading the December contract today for both NQ and for ES. I am not rolling across just yet. I'll be rolling across early next week. I'll be watching the volume comparison between the December 23 contracts and the March 24 contracts and seeing when is the most opportune time to roll. I prefer rolling once the volume has taken over in the next contract, the March contract, by a fair margin. If it's still even Stevens, I'm probably still on the previous one, but if it's considerably more, then I'm on the new one. But that will either be Monday or Tuesday. Welcome all the people on YouTube. Welcome to the stream. We are streaming the NFP release, and thanks to my friends at Financial Juice. Hopefully some people will be able to hear it, whether it's on YouTube or Discord. You'll be able to hear the feed through this stream just for a few minutes. What we're going to try and do today is really prep for that 8:30, and then I'm guessing or expecting, really, again, I cannot predict the future, as I say 1,000 times a day, but I'm expecting that the volatility will be significant at the 8:30 or maybe just before the 8:30 release, and that we'll have plenty to watch and talk about live on both ES and NQ. And if you are trading, and I actually have got my trading engine on, I'm debating to see whether there is something to trade or to get in just before or just after the release. It's one of those occasions where I do not ordinarily take any trades during the stream, but this is the highlight of the week, as most of you who look at the economic releases know. So it's one of those where, as long as you've got a stop in place and you are prepared for your stop to be slipped, sometimes the risk to reward can be quite beneficial. So that is one of the reasons why my engine is on today. Right, so we're going to try and do some of that prep, and if we can, we're going to scroll back in the NQ filtered heat map and have a look at how it could have helped potentially if you were trading during the European session up to about really 10-15 minutes ago. It helped quite a few times today, and that's my personal opinion. Just having a look across in ES at the moment at this low, you can see that I've contracted the column, so I've blended two columns together. This is the volume profile, so I've put the numbers in there. It's just so I can squeeze more data onto the screens. In other words, get more of the actual heat map onto the screens, because as I always try and show you, it's beneficial to have them side by side. But the problem is if you have too many of these columns, and I've got two of them taken over by Cloud Notes, if you have too many of the columns, then you don't get much of the map itself on the screen when I'm doing this. And I've just realized again that I have not done what I normally do, which is make sure that you can see all the numbers. So apologies again. I was actually trading right up until I started this stream. That's why it was on so low. But there you go. So all the numbers should now be legible to everybody on whatever resolution you're on in YouTube. Okay, so as it's all slowed down a little bit, even though it does look like it will continue at least to get down to the 76 and maybe the 70 level in NQ, we shall have a look at the slideshow. Oh, here we go. It's getting close to the 76. Just zoom out a little bit, see what's hitting. Sometimes you have to zoom right in to see that it's 12 they've hit at the lows, and that's likely unfinished. They're going to, after they've thumped that, retraced, it's likely that they'll push down. They're looking to get this 70 level or close to it, and maybe that's fuel for a move up. That's been in place since 1 a.m. New York time, so basically the late in the Asian session. Yeah, I have, for my trade journal, I subdivide a lot of these sessions up. So like in my journal, I have a post-US, which is 1800 hours until the Japan Open. Then I'll have a Japan Open one, a China Open one, an Asia late, Germany, London, European morning, and then this I call the breakfast hour, and then RTH. So basically, just for my journaling, I like to know for my record so I can filter on which subsession particular comments or trade types or trade outcomes or whatever it is that I'm looking for can be seen quite easily in the database that I have. And I do not these days use any commercial trade logging things like Tradeetics or whatever. I do not use them. I use my own one that I built in a free note-taking software called Obsidian. So in terms of statistics, I look at the basic Sierra statistics, which are very, very good, and I also export those to Excel and play with them a little bit. But separately to that, I actually journal inside a text journal, and I've got a database within that I built, and that's how I look back. As I say during these sessions, the best teacher is not me. The best teacher is you. You are the best teacher for yourself. You'll learn more, and you will learn even more from the mistakes that you make. And as somebody has said to me often, and just generally, necessity is the mother of inventions. And how that applies to trading, in my view, is that the mistakes that you make, you especially if you repeat those mistakes again and again, you will have to find a way around them, and that is where the necessity comes around. And unless you find a way around those mistakes, you will not have a trading account. So that's why it is the mother of invention, because you have to get creative, because you have to deal with yourself to ensure that you do not keep making those mistakes. And it is human to make those same mistakes in trading again and again and again. This is not a normal practice. This is a game of chance with probability and maths involved. And it goes against all the kind of survival instincts that you have built in. I'm not going to do much of that psychology stuff in this, but I'm sure many of you who are watching will have read a lot, watched a few webinars, paid for courses maybe, all about how you deal with your own psychology. Anyway, as we go, I'm just watching to see if we're going to smash into this 70 level. So that's the reason why I haven't done any of the slideshow just yet. I'm just watching to see what is going to be taken out there. I think we've got 5 at the very low in NQ, and ES has taken out most of this. This is the filtered heat map, so you can see where they're putting in some new liquidity down at the 4, 5, 7, 8 level. So again, I like to have a look at these liquidity maps hand in hand to see if they're showing me information in either of them that can be used in either of them or the other one. Sometimes the information I get from ES I can use in NQ and vice versa. And sometimes it's clear which market is leading which. Over the last week and a half, I've pointed out that that it's the finance sector that's been the strongest, and that means that because ES is more heavy in the finance sector than NQ, the ES has been leading or has been stronger or more bullish during that last week and a half, 2 weeks, etc. We're just watching this come down. So at the moment it says 8, but it's not 8, it's 5. I'm curious to see what is hitting that. And I know this has been in place for quite a while. I'm just looking to see, yep, they've got to the 71 level and they've hit it with 17 so far. This is unlikely to be finished. Let's see what happens when they smash down into the 70. And they've formed some liquidity below, as you can see, at 65, 66. It's always quite interesting when they've got two little batches of liquidity, a solid one that's been there forever and this little one that they've just added now. I think they're trying to draw people down a little bit further, so let's just watch them try to do that. ES has gone through its little support zone of liquidity. We're looking for a little spike in NQ to signal that they, some form of a little climactic spike to suggest that this particular down run may be over, like that, for example. Okay, sorry, I did actually, that's the first time in any of these sessions that I've actually stopped and taken a trade, but I do apologize. Actually, I won't apologize. I was actually talking people through what I was about to do, so I hope, you may have actually seen me take a trade there. It was just to show that, I do actually trade. So you've seen that live. It was in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. So I'd like people to know that I'm not one of those people that is a pure educator that does not trade. That I put my money where my mouth is, and that if I'm talking about something coming up, and I was actually trading, you would have seen me take that trade. So I've got my Sierra and my Bookmap connected, so you actually did see me take a trade, even though you only saw the notifications from Rhythmic inside Bookmap. Anyway, that was interesting. So let's get back to the prep and the slideshow. So yeah, that's the first time. If I do take one for the NFP, it will be a swing rather than anything else. But I don't know if I will. I'll probably save my bullets for a little bit later after the webinar. So let's move along to the slideshow. And feel free to ask any questions you've got about why I took that long there. Feel free to ask. So these are the important announcements today. The economic releases, the non-farm payrolls, which is coming up in 16.5 minutes, or the unemployment rate, those are together, and the forecast there, that's the number. So when we do listen to that, the forecast is 180 and the prior is 150. So those two numbers, I believe, will come first before this 3.9%. And it's, is the number that they announce materially different from there? It's not, is it higher or lower? I mean, we do not know how the market is going to react. It's just what I'm most interested when I get to these major volatile economic releases is how different is it from forecast. And again, that forecast, which is a consensus forecast, may be different from the forecast that the big players in the market have for themselves. So sometimes you think, oh my God, it's 300, but it hasn't moved. That's because they forecasted it was going to be 300 or whatever. That's just a random example. Okay, let's move on to the next screen. So yeah, nothing much has changed from what we were talking about on the daily the other day. There's been no dramatic turnaround in TNX or anything like that. So ES remains in this range, and price action suggests, again, this is a probability suggestion, nothing else, that once you have a strong up move and then you pause and balance in a range, the normal behavior or the probability is that it is going to continue going up, in the same direction as it was before it arrived in this small balance zone. NQ has been a bit weaker about that, but it has turned around a little bit, and it's suggesting it is more bullish than when we talked about it on Wednesday. Okay, and just a quick look. It's actually a 3-minute, but it's squished up, so it doesn't really matter whether this is 3, 5, or 10 minutes. The light grey is the ETH. That's yesterday. This is today's ETH. And you can see if the yesterday mid is this black dotted line or dashed line, you can see how strong this has been. In other words, we have gone nowhere near the mid of yesterday's RTH range, and that is quite bullish, regardless of the fact that we just took out the overnight low in ES and NQ. That low is still well above yesterday's mid, so that's worth noting. So you may think, oh my God, we're at the low of the overnight session. I always ask myself, where is that overnight low in relation to yesterday's RTH range? And this is bearing in mind that yesterday's RTH is when the real market's open, the underlying stocks are open. Today's ETH is just it's a reflection of the other markets in play, the European ones, the Asian ones, the currencies, etc. But it is not an open market. We've got some pre-open activity in some of the stocks and some of the pre-market. You may follow some of the things like Apple, QQQ, etc. that are open, but yeah, it really gets underway at the RTH open. So just got to keep doing a time check. So we've got about 13 minutes. So yeah, so I'll talk through why I took a long there, right? And I actually had quite a heavy long for me for that particular type of little scalp, because it is a strong fade. So I'm looking at this resting liquidity, which if you go all the way back was there from 1 a.m. We've had a significant down move. We've had an overnight low in place. So you can see that the setup correlates, or the setup is basically what I would describe when I first started putting out some supply and demand setups. This is the type C, this is the spring, this is the archetypal spring. It's not the perfect one where you have a spring right into resting support. It actually took out that supporting liquidity, but it had that lovely spike below and quite a nice reaction back. And if you watch NQ a lot, you are looking for those spikes because the probability is that they will be reclaimed, and especially after a big move, the more likely they are to be reclaimed quickly. Okay, let's focus a bit on ES, because if you are actually going to trade the NFP release, NQ might be too thin and too volatile for you. If I look at the current liquidity, this is, I think it's the nearest 10 levels. The average is about 6.5, and for ES it's about 124. So there's a lot more liquidity. How can that help? You might not be slipped on your stop by such a significant margin in ES should you trade this. Sorry, Sierra chart's covering that. Okay. Sorry. Let me just get rid of that. There you go. Sorry. Thanks, Tom. Sorry, I didn't realize it was. It was just the image slideshow. So yeah, just to recap what I just said in terms of the spring, if I just zoom out, you had this low about 7:15. You had this liquidity which has been in place since 1 a.m. It was a classic spring, comes down the previous low, smashes through it, and actually smashed through liquidity, big spike through it, and immediate retracement. So that is a spring and also a scalp in this circumstance, because we're in quite a high volatility environment for the next little while. Maybe in all morning through the RTH. So a scalp can still get you a significant number of points. So yeah, apologize, Tom, for that slideshow being in the way. Have we got time for the TPOs? I think we do. So let's have a quick look. So we're just looking at the ETH, which is quite balanced. The profile is quite balanced, and it's really within the second, or the if I break this down, you can see that it's within the afternoon value or balance area You look at the Bell distribution curve to see it's pretty much a balanced area in ES. So that's basically what this is saying, is that nothing has changed in ES. We're just traversing up and down the value that they established in ES and yesterday afternoon. And you can see if we zoom right out and we scrunch this down, you can see we are in a big range, right? And and on the profile side of it, what's interesting, you've got settlement T+1 just up here as maybe a first target should it be a break up at this release, and you've also got this untested naked point of control up above, just above the 4600 level. So you've got this is again the December contract, and if we flick across to NQ, again, I mean this time let's just draw this one. The balance, you have to. I don't think I'll do that again because that's poor. The balance is really about there. I mean, or you could draw it. This is a little bit subjective to about there, but again, we're just basically around that balance and nothing has happened in NQ. If we scrunch this up a little bit, what's interesting is this little zone up here. It'll be interesting to see if we can get to that, which is just under last month's high, just under the 16,200 level. And let me ditch all of that and go back to Bookmap. So we've had a nice bounce. We're well off this little low already. We're at the 80 level. If we dig out the relative volume, and I'll just bring it over just for a minute. The point of this is that on such a volatile day, these averages normally get smashed. So in ETH, we've had on NQ 75 of 107, 15 of 22. But if you look at the sum, the total, it's basically an average of 192 and an average of 34. So there's loads of room, loads of scope. If we're going to exceed that average today, and there's a good chance that we will, then there is a lot of potential to, if you get into the right swing, to trail your even if you scale out, it's to trail your last couple of scales and try and make the most of opportunities when they work in your favor. I'm not saying that they will work in your favor or that we'll get any of this right, but there is an opportunity there, if you do manage to get it right. And luck does play a considerable part of this. Okay, let's have a look both at the filtered and unfiltered. Just looking at the time check again now. We don't have to turn the feed on just yet. I'm checking that I've got my feed running through. Yes, I do. So when I turn it on, both you and I should hear it. Let's have a look at the unfiltered feed to start with in ES. Right. One thing I want to point out is this sell iceberg here. Not the fact that they've only filled 5 contracts, right? And not really the fact that there's not been a huge amount traded around that level, about maybe 1,000 or so. What I'm pointing out here is they're advertising that they're still willing to do business, right? Nothing has a 100% win rate in trading. All this is doing is saying that there's a reasonable probability that we're going to get back up there so that they can trade again. Maybe we'll go much higher, who knows, but there is a probability that will occur, and that's why that sell resting iceberg above price does tend to interest me, because on the statistics that I have compiled myself, that is an interesting prospect. Okay, you can see that if I had held that spring and I wasn't talking on this webinar, you can see it would have been working quite well in Q there, but it's by the by. Okay, so let's have a look as well. The other purpose of looking at both the unfiltered and the filtered heat maps is to see if there's anything unusual, any distance away, either on the upside or the downside. So what are the standout numbers? And we can probably see this better on the filtered map, which we're about to go to. But the first thing that we notice there is that 4602 at 239 contracts, and maybe some more up about the 4620, the 4630 levels. You've got some well above 100 up there. Okay. So if we go to the filtered, sometimes it's just a little bit more obvious, and it's more interesting to see where they place them. You might have to zoom right out on this one. So at 4602, they've got 205 contracts. I assume that's correct. And it's not been smart clustered. Smart clustering is where the software takes values from several different levels, whether it's volume or orders in the book, and aggregates them in a smart fashion. Sometimes I like zooming in to see what the actual numbers are. But in terms of resting unfiltered orders, it's unfiltered in the sense that these orders have not changed by size or by price at any time since they were first placed. There is nothing else up there yet. Doesn't mean that we won't go up there. In fact, looking at the macro level and the pure price action stuff, it suggests that we would go up there, but it will be interesting. But from a liquidity perspective, they flagged this 4602 level, and that's the only one that they've really flagged on this particular heat map. And if we look at the way, when we zoom out vertically, you can see that this is like a brick wall of support, that they kind of hold it. They did that in Asia, and they eventually let go, and price retraced down to here. In Asia, if we drag this back, I'm going to have to really zoom out. Yeah, there we go. In Asia, you can see that this big brick wall was there for quite a while, and that's how they held price. And maybe they just filled it all up, let it go down, and then it went snapped straight back up, and that's how they made their money. So it's interesting to see how thick those bands look when you do zoom out vertically, and that is today rather than commenting on any other day in question. Okay, at 8:27. Best to turn on the feed so that we don't miss anything. If it's too loud, I will turn it down with my volume sliders. So I'm just sliding the volume down if it will behave. There we go. So you should be able to hear it in the background, especially if you're on YouTube. And now it's quite interesting. I mean, we're going to focus on actually we're going to focus on the unfiltered, because I'm interested in the stops and icebergs, which you don't get on TraderMap Pro, unfortunately, at the moment. So I'm going to focus on the filtered NQ and the unfiltered ES, because it's the ES stops and icebergs that interest me a lot more than the ones in NQ. So what is staying in place? You can see how much of this liquidity suddenly got pulled. You've also got this liquidity at this round level in NQ at 15,950, but I'll take that with a pinch of salt. Maybe once we get towards there, I'll begin to believe it a little bit more. But the moment of the resting liquidity, there are only two things that really get my attention, or three things actually. Where yesterday's low is, in case we have a sudden whip down and we just take it out. Where this sell resting iceberg is, and where this resting liquidity is up at 4602. Okay. So the feeder has gone quiet on us. What time is it now? 8:28.5. I'm sure the feed will go loud again in about 30 seconds. So I'm not placing an order in the book before this trade. I will watch what's happening. I may place a trade, within about 5 minutes after the release. This is more of a one-off. I don't tend to do this during these streams. But really, one thing I will do straight away is get this ready, which is the line, the horizontal line, so we can mark the scene of the crime. So you've got 45 seconds. I'm going to just try and mark that straight away. So If I was expecting anything or thought anything might happen, it would be a breakout up eventually. It doesn't necessarily have to happen at the release itself. They can play a lot of different games, a lot of different ways they can do it. They can get a lot of fuel from down under first before they go up. But it will be interesting to see whether they just have a vertical leap up first or not, or whether we have a vertical leap down. So I will be quiet so we can hear it. So we had a push down so far, higher than forecast. I'm going to have to zoom in on that one. It's gone a bit further. So we mark that about there, and horizontal line in this one, probably around about there. We'll mark that. Never going to mark it perfectly. So my hindsight comment, which is always wonderful when you make a hindsight comment, is I'm glad I didn't place a buy in the market before that one. But it does not mean that we do not end up going up today. Very, very early days. So the first thing that we often see is a retest of the scene of the crime. I will turn off the feed now because I think we've got enough information on it. So the headline news was that the jobs number was higher than expected. So we tested up towards the scene of the crime, but we didn't get there. So that is interesting because that's a little bit weaker than the kind of bounce that you would ordinarily expect. Okay, what are we seeing? So we're seeing the 16040 at settlement in NQ staying there. The scene of the crime 15970-ish, so we're about 55, 60 points south of that in NQ. The scene of the crime in ES is 4580-ish, and we are about 14 points, 13, 14 points below that. So the market has certainly gone down a bit since then. When we were looking at the news release on Wednesday, and if you can recall how we had some clear liquidity that was up above, I think it was in NQ, it was at the 15,990 or 16,000 and 16,010 levels or 16,020 levels. That was a much easier read of what was likely to happen than some of the liquidity that we saw in place in NQ and ES before this major release. But this one's normally a little bit harder and a little bit more vicious in terms of price reaction than the one that came out on Wednesday. So we're watching to see how this is being supported. And the first thing to note there is that there was a nice little delta tail in ES. So if you scrunch it up a bit, you can see that little delta tail in ES. And what is trading at the very, very lows at the moment, 39, it looks like, 39, which is a lowish value. So I'm just looking at the shape of the profile there on my other charts. The idea there is one that I've mentioned before. And again, I'm keeping an open mind as to whether we go up or down, even though we are currently below the scene of the crime. But the reason I'm looking at the tail or the very low point on the ES at the moment is because there is a statistic that I am interested in, and that statistic is that if this were to be a trend day, then the most common time for the extreme, whether it's the high extreme or the low extreme, to be put in place for the entire RTH session is within 15 minutes of the 8:30 release, i.e. between 8:30 and 8:45 a.m. New York time. So I'm just I'm ignoring really what, even if ETH was above that, I'm interested to see what happens from this scene of the crime. That's what the statistic really relates to. It doesn't really take into account the rest of the ETH session. Let's have a look at what is at the very bottom in NQ as well. So you can see again that resting liquidity there was put in place right at the release, or maybe a second or so beforehand, right? And they came right down to it. And that's why, or one of the reasons why, that filtered Trader Map Pro is interesting to me. I probably spent more time looking at that. I have not touched the settings for a good couple of weeks, just left it alone. It's caused me more interest than a lot of the other add-ons. Okay, if anybody's got any comments or anything, or wants to ask me any questions as well while we just look there. I know that some of you are probably trading and you're probably very, very busy, so I'm aware of that one too. So, what I think I can see in ES is that they are supporting with these liquidity bands and pushing price up back for a retest of this scene of the crime at the 4580 level. What happens at that point, as in when we do retest it, will be the most interesting. Do we retest it once, fall off, and then do we get back up to it, or do we reject it quite clearly once we get to 4580? So that's the most interesting thing to me at the moment. And we can zoom right in and have a look at it. So it's quite strong price action now since we formed that last low. So it's the lows really around about into this liquidity support here at 832 actually. So within 2 minutes of the release, a low was formed. So I will probably mark that in. I'll mark that in my Sierra. I'm quite interested in that one. So I am just marking for statistical purpose only whether the low at around about 62 or 61.75 in ES turns out to be the low of the rest of the session, including RTH. That is the thing that I'm noting to see whether it will do that or not today. But it's only more likely to do it if we break back through this scene of the crime. At the moment, we have gone almost right back up to it, and so far we've rejected it. So that puts a bit of a dampener on that one. So we just have to keep an open mind. One of the other things as well is this idea of contrarian thinking. Even though their favorite activity in markets, especially these indices futures, is to squeeze shorts, a lot of people, a lot of retail would be aware of, the price action picture on the daily, the fact that it was really, really quite bullish. The fact that the interest rate outlook looks like it's going to go down, which is bullish for stocks. So a lot of retail are aware of that. So whether they can squeeze them in the way that they might otherwise, they normally squeeze them when it looks like the world's about to end. That's the best time for these big players to squeeze the retail sectors who are short. The other thing to bear in mind as well, when I was looking at the options picture for tonight, there is quite a large amount of expiry in SPX, which is the options really that dictates or has the most relevance to ES futures. There's a lot of expiry of the call options, which are at 4,600 in ES. I've forgotten what the current premium is. When I looked at it the other day, I think it was about 7, so that would be like about 4,607 in ES. So my point is that a lot of that expires today, the 8th of December. So one of the issues is what really is holding up the market after that goes. Is that a resistance level that's suddenly being pulled today because it expires so the market can shoot up, or is it a magnet that was holding the market's interest up there so that once the magnet is taken away, the market initially moves away from that magnet, so like it hasn't got the same level of attraction anymore. Okay, let's keep talking about what ES is doing. So we've still, if we zoom out, we've still had a very, very good retracement, and we have not gone back under this 473 level since we went down there. So we are still getting up to this scene of the crime at 4580. And if anybody else has got a different scene of the crime level, please let me know what it is. Yeah, basically tried to drag it from that. I mean, you could have had it at slightly higher, a slightly higher level at 4581. Now that's the first time we've retagged it. So it's a zone. It's a zone of 4580 to 81-ish, maybe 4580 to 4581.25. That is the crime level. Maybe I should have drawn it as a rectangle rather than a horizontal line. But this is the first time that we've tagged it or slightly broken it. And again, keep in mind that that resting iceberg is still there, advertising the fact they want to trade up there. And this resting liquidity of 230 at 460.275 is still there. Okay, so that's clearly above the scene of the crime. So now what we want to see is, does this area hold? So that's the 4580 to 4581 level. Does that hold? Because if that holds, then the picture has suddenly switched from being a little bit bearish or quite bearish when that release was made to being bullish again, that the market has digested the news and is no longer feeling so sad about it, and things have picked up. And interestingly, in NQ across over here, even though we've got plenty of liquidity there, we're right at that level and we've broken cleanly through it. See whether we can hold it, but we did break cleanly through it. If we zoom out, you can see that we broke it by about 3 points or so. But this again is a zone, so we're at the scene of the crime zone in NQ. You've got some liquidity that they might go and get some fuel at here at 960. Looks like they're about to smash into it. What is at that level down here? No, it's a small volume trade at 2. So we were just watching to see whether this is a bit of support or absorption of sellers. They're trying to drag them down here to refuel to get back above that. Is that what is happening, or is it something else? And yeah, looking across where the most recent buys are in NQ, they're really in the 62 to 66 level, and we're just underneath that at the moment. And there's a really, really big seller that was in place at 57. So just about that level there. So that seller is currently, the support for the market, 57 in NQ. Are they going to get back on side? Again, we're not talking about 1 or 2 ticks. We're talking about a few points. Are they on side or off side? So I'm curious to see whether, what kind of red tail are they forming at this 57 level, and is it going to hold? What's happening as well on the liquidity side? So all these little flashes of liquidity we ignore. We're looking for the more stable ones. So far, they've just trapped a few more sellers at that 57 level, and they're pushing back up to the 70 level. So that big seller at 57 is the trap point at the moment, the line in the sand. That's why I was looking across at it. You may have noticed I paused because I was looking at something on another chart to see where I could see that big seller. I mean, when I'm trading these releases in Bookmap, I tend to zoom in a lot. So if I'm looking for something which is a little bit more high level, such as the big seller zone, I have to look elsewhere. It's difficult to use one heat map for lots and lots and lots of different purposes. Somebody in the Discord forum asked a wise question the other day, which is, how can I have a book map for a short term and a longer term? And there are 2 add-ons that can do that. There's this Trader Map Pro one, which you can use for a copy of instrument, and there's also an instrument copy add-on. Both of those, so that that way you can have a a short-term and a longer-term view on the heat map. So again, we have that scene of the crime in NQ, and we have smashed through it properly this time, and we are clear of it by 15 points or so. And an ES, which I was not watching as carefully, yeah, we're well above the 4580 level. We've gone as high as 8.5 points above it now, and that resting liquidity is starting to look really attractive. And you've got some more liquidity there, that they 288 at 4590.50. They're trying to get people there. We're watching this absorption, this buy ice of 206. Yeah. And where the delta comes in is you can see how many sellers were at it. I know we've gone through. I don't. That's not a setup for me. I'm interested to see what the number of sellers that they absorb out. On this occasion, the sellers overpowered them and they went down. So we're just basically chopping around at the moment. Maybe we're going to chop all the way back down to the scene of the crime. That's how I use that iceberg in conjunction with the delta column and the delta numbers column. Struggling to actually. Oh, there we go. Sometimes, yeah, there we go. It just wasn't responding to me vertically. I think I'm putting Bookmap under a little bit of pressure in this highly volatile time. See, I mean, you can look at the volatility, and this is a very good reason over here in NQ why you don't talk about price levels, especially in this kind of release environment. It's because you get these big spikes through. So if you had this as like a 1-point zone in your mind, you know, that's too tight to identify a level when it's going crazy like this. You know, it broke back through the scene of the crime by about 5.5 points. And that's one of the reasons why in such a circumstance, you know, you're going to have a much wider stop if you were trading NQ than you would have done about an hour and a half ago. An hour and a half ago, when I was trading, and I was trading a couple of shorts on the way down to when it first went down to 970, I was trading with a 5-point stop, but right now I'd probably be trading with something like a 25-point stop. You know, I'm looking at the rotations. I have to really scrunch up my Sierra to see what the rotation sizes are, but yeah, some of those rotations have been enormous. Like on the scene of the crime rotation down in NQ was 383 ticks straight down, and some of these rotations back up have been very large as well. So you've just, you know, when you see, I mean, I know I spent quite a bit of Wednesday talking about these rotations, but they do fascinate me because they really get into your head of how, you know, of this concept of being wrong. You know, you can measure when you're wrong when you're still in a trade where you're a couple of rotations down. You know, that's clearly you should have been out earlier than that. But it just gives you an idea of how the market is going from A to B. You know, there's these little mini rotations up and down, up and down, up and down. Tom talks about them as micro structure in his webinar when he starts looking at each of these little highs and lows, these little swings. I like looking at the numbers occasionally as well, just to see. And remember, you know, one of my aims is always trying to get multiple R's. So if I don't know what these little rotation sizes are, it means I'm part guessing at being able to get that 2 or 3R, because I don't know how many of those rotations I have to get through to get to that 3R. And trading blind is never a very good idea, because we're already blind since we can't predict the future. If we're blind about some of the objective stuff, that means we're being deliberately blind, in my personal opinion. Okay. So this liquidity up here in NQ at 15,985, that is bounding. I can't make this any dimmer in NQ, but you can see if we just zoom back in, they placed that effectively. When did they place it? About 8:44, and that has acted as a boundary, and below you've got two boundaries. You've got this boundary at 61,961 and at 955. So they're effectively creating a wide-ranging trading range. One of the best ways to work out if you are in a range or not is to see, is there a bell curve on the volume profile for this? And I'm guessing that there would be. I'm looking across at one of my charts. Yeah, I'm seeing a bit of a bell curve there from the 986 down to the 966, a 20-point bell curve here. And I'm guessing there'll be the same. It's not as clear in ES. There's a much tighter bell curve that I'm seeing, which is more this range of this little low that we're at here up to the 89, more of a 4-point bell curve trading range. And the idea is, if you identify very, very quickly that you're in this pause range zone and you are interested in taking smaller trades, even on crazy days like this, the idea is that you take it from the extreme of the range, you scale, if possible, at the middle of the range, and you try and get to the other side of the range. That is range trading in a nutshell. But it's, what tools, what ability do you have to recognize that, why is this coming into range now, and can this benefit me in my trading? I'm not one of those people that says I must get 20 or 30 points in the ES. No, I'm simply looking for multiple R's in my trade, which is a multiple of the 1 R risk that I'm placing in every trade. So I do not care, and I do not measure every day whether or how many points I might have got in NQ or ES. It's just irrelevant to me. So we're here in NQ, we're right at this 85. How many times have we approached that? You could say 1, 2, 3. This is like the fourth approach. Still haven't got through, but if you were trading that range, you took a short there, you went back down there. There's only 5 points. There's not that much. Which after such a volatile piece of news, that's a relatively narrow range in NQ. But this is the fifth or sixth attempt, and the more times you bash at a brick wall, one of those bricks is going to get dislodged. The only question here is that you've got more liquidity acting as resistance that keeps being placed above at 87.5 and 90. I am just looking. I had not noticed that this resting iceberg in ES got pulled at 847, so I wasn't paying attention. I normally do pay attention to those things. That doesn't mean we will go up, doesn't mean we will go down. It's just something to note that one of the things that I look for when I'm looking for a long has disappeared from ES for the time being. And interesting on NQ on this range, so we broke up and we did a reverse spring or a breakout failure or an up thrust, whatever you want to call it. So we broke that range up, took out the liquidity, and then we came straight back down. So I'm interested to see now, can we get back above 85, or are we going to go to the other side of this range, which is really the scene of the crime down here at 70? So that is another example of that supply and demand trade. It's a slightly different way of trading it. It's trading a range version of it, but it is essentially the same beast. Rather than a channel or uptrend or a downtrend, you're trading a range and you're finding the best way to exploit that for yourself. So the idea there, if you got in around there on that break back in, you would have scaled out some at the halfway point just in case it comes straight back up and then keeps going up. Now if you do not scale at that midpoint, then there is the danger that you will get nothing from the trade whatsoever. And when you are in these ranges, and there's always the potential that at some point, sooner or later, it will break out of that range and it will go at least the height of the range and maybe twice that height of the range. In probability terms, that's the likelihood. So that if you held on and you kept your stop too wide, not only did you not get the scale for the midpoint of the range, but you suddenly got yourself in deep water for no good reason. Okay, quick time check, 8:53. I know I do rattle on at times. I do hope the microphone is clear today and it is picking up what I have been talking about. So yes, it's a little bit duller than I imagined it would be, even though I have commentated live on this action since just before 8:30. I'm glad, I mean, I could have got a couple of trades out of this, but I don't feel like, it was one of those opportunities to go and just get that trade in NQ to go and get us straight 100 points in 5 minutes, because that definitely has not transpired here. So it's a little bit different from from what might ordinarily have occurred on a volatile news release. And it's also interesting that if you've got that call wall or that large options in SPX up here, effectively 4607, 4606, that is still bounding the price range of ES. In other words, we haven't broken out past that, so that that stays in place as something to bear in mind when we get to RTH. In terms of seeing where that open interest is in the options position in SPX, SPY, QQQ, etc., there are lots and lots of free platforms out there, brokers that will give you that information. So you do not need to pay a fortune to get information about future options expiries. When you're talking about zero DTE expiries, it is often the case that you may need to spend some money to get good quality information, but for future OI, open interest, that should not be the case. One of the platforms in options that I've used for a very long time, Interactive Brokers, for example, provided you've got your data fee in place, which is not much, you can get that information on those options. You just look it up yourself. I'm pretty sure the same in TOS, Tasty Trade, you name it. Okay, so we are in this range, and I'm just watching. So again, we're bounded by in ES at the moment, not that resting iceberg, which is dead, but this liquidity up here at 4590, the scene of the crime at 4580, and some new resting liquidity at 4578. So you've got this wide range. Yeah, and why was I suggesting maybe to trade from there? I was hinting that a trade from one end of the range to the other end of the range might be the best trade that's available at the moment. You might get much better trades than this when RTH opens, but that was what was currently being presented to us. So it will be interesting if this does turn out to be a trend day, because it is not hinting as such at the moment. It's hinting at being a nasty, choppy day, a bit like a normal OPEX day. It isn't really the normal monthly OPEX. The only reason I point it out is because a lot of that 4600 SPX options expires today. Okay, just double checking, no questions at all. Okay, it's one of those quiet days where I essentially talk to myself and hope that I'm providing some value to you all. Let me just zoom out at this stage so we can see if there's anything else from the map picture that we want to see that might be helpful to us. So the biggest, fattest thing in ES at the moment is this resting liquidity that came into place after 15 minutes after the release, and it's at 4568. And they're advertising strongly that they don't want to touch that, and they want price to come towards it, right? And you've also got this resting liquidity above at 4602.25 or 4602.50. So those are the two things that, and maybe this double set of liquidity at 4590 and 4590.50. So yeah, you've got a few things, but essentially we're in a range, and we're going from one end of the range to the other. And we're not very far off the scene of the crime. So you could also say that, great, we had lots of up and down movement first, and then up movement afterwards second, but we are still at exactly where we were at 8:30. So we are just chopping around the price zone that was in place at the 8:30 release. Okay, let's bear in mind where we are as well. Yesterday's Globex high, yesterday's high is up at 4596. Yesterday's day low is there. So these levels are the ones that I will be paying attention to. You know, the high and the low, where settlement T+1 is, where the NPC is, where you've got some liquidity close by. That's a naked point of control at just over 4602. 4607, which is where the SPX options will disappear today, later today. I don't know whether that's the morning or the afternoon. So those are the levels just really to watch. You know, if we suddenly make a break through one of those key levels on the upside or the downside, maybe we will get a decent move. The relative volume is 111%, which is low for an NFP release so far at this time of the day. You know, it's above 100% of what it's been for the last 10 days, but one would ordinarily expect it to be a little bit higher than that half an hour after the release. Okay, I think I am at the end. So yeah, we're right back to where we started. So I hope this provided some value. And yeah, have a great RTH session, trade well, have a great weekend. Yeah, remember we're in December, we're in the Santa Claus rally period almost, people, not yet, but almost. So yeah, cheers. I will hang up.